When my son introduced me to his business associates as the old woman who used to be useful, I smiled politely and served their drinks. But what I did 3 weeks later made him lose everything he thought was his. I'm grateful you're here with me today. Stay until the end to see how this unfolds, and please comment which country you're watching from. I want to know how far my story travels. At 70 years old, I believed I understood betrayal in all its forms. I'd buried a husband, survived financial hardships, and rebuilt my life from nothing more than determination and grit. But standing in my own living room that October evening, watching my son Damien treat me like a piece of worn-out furniture in front of strangers, I discovered there are depths of humiliation I'd never imagined possible. The pain of that night would become the catalyst for everything that followed, a series of events that would strip away my illusions about family, reveal truths I'd been too blind to see, and ultimately force me to become someone I never thought I'd have to be. It started on a Tuesday morning in late October. The maple trees lining Ashwood Avenue were ablaze with autumn colors, their leaves drifting down onto my front porch like scattered pieces of copper and gold. I was sitting at my kitchen table, still in my bathrobe, enjoying my first cup of coffee and working through the daily crossword puzzle when I heard the unmistakable sound of Damien's car pulling into my driveway. I glanced at the clock above the stove, 7:45 in the morning. Damien never visited this early unless something was wrong or he needed something urgently. My stomach tightened with maternal instinct as I heard his key turn in the lock, the same key I'd given him years ago for emergencies. "Mother?" His voice echoed through the hallway before he appeared in the kitchen doorway, already dressed in one of his expensive Italian suits. At 42, Damien cut an impressive figure, tall like his father had been, with the same sharp features and piercing gray eyes. But where Theodore had possessed warmth and humor, Damien seemed to grow colder and more calculating with each passing year. "Damien, sweetheart, what brings you here so early?" I set down my coffee cup and started to rise, but he waved me back into my seat. Stay, I can't stop long." He was already moving toward my refrigerator, opening it with the casual presumption of someone who still considered this house partially his own. "I'm heading to a breakfast meeting with the Sterling Industries people, but I needed to catch you before your day got started." I watched him pull out the orange juice, pour himself a glass, and drain it, without bothering to get a proper glass from the cabinet. He drank straight from my ceramic pitcher, something I'd scolded him for as a teenager, but now seemed too tired to mention. "What's going on?" I asked, wrapping both hands around my coffee mug for warmth. The October mornings in Millbrook Springs had turned chilly, and I hadn't yet turned on the heating. Damien set down the pitcher and turned to face me with that expression I'd come to recognize over the years, the one he wore when he'd already made a decision and was simply informing me of the outcome rather than consulting me about it. "I need you to host a dinner party tonight, here at the house." I blinked in surprise. "Tonight? Damien, that's very short notice. I have my book club meeting at the Riverside Community Center at 7. "Cancel it." His tone was matter-of-fact, as if my plans were inconsequential obstacles to be swept aside. "Mother, do you understand what's at stake here? The Pemberton Group is considering my consulting firm for a multi-million-dollar contract. These are Texas oil executives with traditional values. They want to see stability, family connections, solid roots. I need to present the right image." "And what image is that?" I asked quietly. "Successful but grounded, ambitious but family-oriented. They're flying in specifically for this meeting, and I told them I'd host them at my family home." He paused, and I saw something flicker across his face. Calculation, perhaps, or mild discomfort. "They think this is my house, Mother." The words hung in the air between us. My fingers tightened around the coffee mug until my knuckles went white. You told them this was your house. I told them I owned property in one of Millbrook Springs' most established neighborhoods. They assumed it was my primary residence, and I didn't correct them. He crossed his arms defensive now. Does it really matter? You raised me here. It's my family home as much as yours. Except that it's my name on the deed, my mortgage that I paid off over 20 years, my home that your father and I bought together in 1994. Damien's jaw tightened, that stubborn set I recognized from his childhood when he was being told something he didn't want to hear. Semantics, Mother. The point is, I need this dinner to happen tonight. The Pemberton executives, Gerald and his son Thomas, are bringing their financial advisor. I've also invited Christina. Christina? A colleague. His answer came too quickly, too smoothly. She's been instrumental in helping me develop the proposal for the Pemberton contract. Her expertise in financial structuring is invaluable. Something in his tone made me pause. I'd been married for 38 years before Theodore passed. I knew what careful evasion sounded like, but I was too focused on the immediate problem to pursue that particular thread. Damien, even if I were to cancel my book club meeting, planning a proper dinner party takes time. I'd need to shop, prepare. Use your grocery budget. I'll reimburse you later. He was already moving toward the door, checking his phone with the distracted air of someone whose attention had already moved on to the next task. Keep it elegant, but authentic. These are people who value traditional home cooking over pretentious restaurant fare. Show them real hospitality. How many people are we talking about? 5 total, including me. Dinner at 7 sharp. And Mother. He paused at the kitchen doorway, glancing back at me. Dress appropriately. Something respectable but understated. I need you to look the part of a proper matriarch, not, well, you know. Before I could formulate a response, he was gone. I heard the front door close, then his car engine starting up and fading down Ashwood Avenue. I sat alone in my kitchen, the crossword puzzle abandoned, my coffee growing cold, feeling a strange mix of emotions I couldn't quite untangle. Pride that my son needed me, needed my home to impress his business associates. Resentment at being commanded rather than asked. Unease at the casual way he'd claimed my house as his own. And underneath it all, a creeping sense that something was off about this entire situation. But Damien was my son. My only child, the baby I cradled, the boy I raised alone after Theodore's heart attack took him at 59. If Damien needed this from me, how could I refuse? I stood up, joints creaking in protest, and began making a shopping list. The Millbrook Springs Farmers Market was crowded that Tuesday morning. I navigated the aisles slowly, my canvas shopping bags growing heavier with each stop. Fresh vegetables from the Morrison farm stand, artisanal bread from the bakery on Maple Street, prime beef short ribs from Hensley's butcher shop, where old Jack Hensley had been cutting meat since before Damien was born. "Big dinner tonight, Cordelia?" Jack asked, as he wrapped the short ribs in brown paper, his weathered hands moving with practiced efficiency. "I'm sure whatever you make will be wonderful. That boy of yours should count himself lucky to have a mother who still cooks for him at his age." I smiled, but the compliment felt hollow. Lucky. Was Damien lucky, or had I made him entitled by always being available, always accommodating his needs above my own? By the time I returned home, it was nearly 11. I put away the groceries and immediately began cooking. The short ribs needed to braise for hours to achieve that fall-off-the-bone tenderness. I prepared them with red wine, beef stock, aromatics, garlic, thyme, and rosemary from my garden. The scent filled my kitchen with rich, savory warmth. While the meat cooked, I prepared roasted root vegetables, carrots, parsnips, and baby potatoes tossed with olive oil and herbs. I made homemade dinner rolls from my mother's recipe, the same rolls I'd made for every holiday dinner since I was a young bride.
For dessert, I decided on chocolate bourbon pecan pie, a recipe that had won me 3 blue ribbons at the Mobrook County Fair. By 3 in the afternoon, my feet were aching. The arthritis in my knees had been getting worse lately, a dull throb that intensified when I stood for long periods. But I pushed through, driven by that old maternal need to make everything perfect for my child. I took a break at 4 to shower and dress. Standing in my bedroom, the same room Theodore and I had shared for decades, I surveyed my closet with critical eyes. What did appropriate but understated mean? What did the proper matriarch wear to a dinner party in her own home? I chose a simple navy blue dress with 3/4 sleeves, modest but well-tailored, pearl earrings that Theodore had given me for our 20th anniversary, low heels that wouldn't aggravate my feet. I styled my silver gray hair into a neat bun and applied light makeup, just enough to look polished without seeming like I was trying too hard. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I saw a woman who appeared every one of her 70 years, but still had clear, intelligent eyes and steady hands. Still capable. Still useful. I returned to the kitchen to finish the final preparations. I set the dining room table with my good china, the Lenox pattern my mother had given me as a wedding gift, crystal wine glasses that caught the late afternoon light, linen napkins pressed and folded precisely, fresh flowers from my garden arranged in my grandmother's silver vase. By 6:30, everything was ready. The house smelled incredible: rich beef, fresh bread, chocolate, and bourbon. I walked through each room, making small adjustments. A cushion straightened here, a picture frame aligned there. Everything had to be perfect. I was standing in my living room, looking at the family photographs on the mantle: Damien as a baby, Damien graduating high school, Damien's wedding to Lauren 3 years ago, when I heard cars pulling into my driveway. My heart rate accelerated. This was it. Time to play the role my son needed me to play. I opened the door at exactly 6:45 to find Damien standing there with 4 other people. He looked polished and confident in a different suit from the one he'd worn that morning, charcoal gray with a burgundy tie. But it was the others that caught my attention.
2 men who were clearly father and son. The older one, probably in his late 60s, was built like a linebacker despite his age. He had a weathered face, steel gray hair, and eyes that assessed everything with sharp calculation. The younger version stood beside him, perhaps in his early 40s, leaner but with the same predatory intelligence in his gaze. And then there was the woman. She couldn't have been more than 32 or 33, tall, slender, with sleek dark hair that fell past her shoulders like a waterfall of silk. She wore a dress that probably cost more than my monthly Social Security check, emerald green that clung to her figure in ways that were designed to draw attention. Her makeup was flawless, her jewelry subtle but expensive. But what made my stomach clench was the way she stood next to Damien. Not beside him like a colleague, beside him like a lover. The casual intimacy of her hand on his arm, the way he angled his body slightly toward hers, the almost imperceptible claim of possession in his posture. And suddenly, I understood. This wasn't a colleague, this was his mistress. "Mother, I'd like you to meet Gerald Pemberton and his son Thomas," Damien said smoothly, gesturing to the 2 men. "They're the principals of the Pemberton group I mentioned. Gentlemen, this is my mother, Cordelia." Gerald Pemberton stepped forward with a firm handshake. His grip was strong, his palm calloused despite the expensive watch and gold cufflinks. "Mrs. Winters, it's a pleasure. Thank you for having us on such short notice." "Welcome to my home," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Please, come in." Thomas Pemberton shook my hand next, his grip slightly less crushing than his father's, but equally assessing. "Beautiful house, Mrs. Winters. Classic craftsman architecture. You don't see this quality of construction anymore." "Thank you. My late husband and I purchased it 31 years ago. We raised Damien here." "It must hold a great many memories," Thomas said politely. Oh, she probably doesn't remember most of them clearly. Time tends to blur together at a certain age, doesn't it, Mother? I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw a stranger wearing a familiar face. When had he become this man? This man who diminished his own mother in front of business contacts to make himself seem more controlled, more sophisticated. I'm 70, Damien, not senile. My memory is perfectly intact. Gerald chuckled. My own mother is 78 and sharp as a tack. Don't let anyone tell you age means incompetence, Mrs. Winters. Christina laughed, a high, artificial sound. Well, everyone declines eventually. It's just biology. Nothing to be ashamed of. She said it while looking directly at me, her expression a mixture of pity and superiority. And I understood then that this wasn't just about Damien's business deal. This was personal. Christina wanted me to know my place in the hierarchy she was constructing. She was the young, beautiful, essential woman. I was the old, obsolete mother who needed to step aside gracefully. Dinner should be ready shortly, I said, standing up with more dignity than I felt. Please excuse me while I check on things in the kitchen. I was pulling the short ribs from the oven when I heard Christina's voice carry from the dining room. She wasn't being loud, but the old Craftsman house had excellent acoustics, and sound traveled easily through the rooms. So this is really your family home. I love that you've kept it authentic. Very rustic charm.
Rustic charm. Another backhanded compliment. Damien's response was quieter, but I caught the words grew up here and family legacy and keeping traditions alive. I plated the food with careful precision. Short ribs glistening with rich sauce, roasted vegetables arranged artfully, fresh rolls still warm from the oven. Everything looked magazine perfect. I brought the plates out one by one, setting them before my guests with the practiced grace of someone who'd hosted countless dinners over the years. Gerald and Thomas offered enthusiastic compliments. Even Christina managed to surprise, "Oh, this actually looks quite good." Damien said nothing, already deep in conversation with Gerald about market projections and growth strategies. I took my seat at the head of my own table, the chair that had been mine for 31 years, where I'd sat across from Theodore for thousands of meals, where I'd helped Damien with homework and listened to his childhood dreams. The meal began. The Pembertons attacked their food with genuine appreciation. Gerald actually closing his eyes at the first bite of short rib and murmuring, "Exceptional." Thomas was more reserved, but equally complimentary. Christina picked at her food delicately, eating with the calculated precision of someone who monitored every calorie. But even she couldn't hide the fact that the food was objectively delicious. "Mrs. Winters, this is outstanding," Gerald said, reaching for a second dinner roll. "Haven't had home cooking this good in years. Your son is fortunate to have such a talented mother." "She used to cook more elaborate meals," Damien said, and I heard the implicit correction in his tone. Used to. Past tense. But at her age, it's becoming more difficult for her to manage complicated recipes. "This seems pretty complicated to me," Thomas observed, gesturing at his plate. "Oh, she pulled out all the stops for tonight," Damien continued, speaking about me as if I weren't sitting right there. "But day to day, it's getting harder for her to keep up with the demands of maintaining this house. The cooking, the cleaning, the yard work, it's a lot for someone in her 70s. I set down my fork carefully. "Damien, which is actually something I've been wanting to discuss with you, Mother." He turned to face me fully, and I saw in his eyes that this was it, the real reason for tonight's dinner, the setup I'd been too naive to see coming. My heart began to pound. "This house," Damien continued, "is really becoming too much for you to manage alone. Be honest. When was the last time you cleaned the gutters, or had the HVAC system serviced properly, or dealt with the property tax reassessment?" "I handle everything that needs handling," I said, keeping my voice level despite the alarm bells ringing in my head. "Do you?" His tone was gentle,
Patronizing, the way you'd speak to a child who insists they can tie their own shoes when clearly they can't. Because I drove by last week and noticed the front porch railing is loose. The paint is peeling on the window frames. The landscaping is getting overgrown. Each observation felt like an indictment. Each flaw he had cataloged was presented as evidence of my declining capability. Normal wear and tear on a 30-year-old house, I countered. Wear and tear that requires maintenance you're no longer physically capable of providing. Damien shot back. Mother, I'm not criticizing you. I'm trying to be practical about your situation. Gerald Pemberton had gone very still, his fork suspended halfway to his mouth. Thomas was staring at his plate with intense focus, clearly uncomfortable with the direction this conversation had taken. Christina was watching with barely concealed interest, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. My situation is fine, I said firmly. Is it? He leaned forward, his expression a mask of concern that didn't reach his eyes. You're 70 years old, living alone in a large house that requires constant upkeep. You have arthritis in your knees. You're on a fixed income from Social Security and Dad's pension. Mother, I love you, but we need to face reality here. What reality? That this house is wasted on you. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Even Christina's smile faltered slightly at the bluntness of it. Wasted, I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. I don't mean it harshly, Damien said, though his tone suggested otherwise. I mean that this property, which is worth probably $850,000 in today's market, is sitting here with one elderly person rattling around in it, barely able to maintain it, while younger people like myself are cramped in expensive downtown apartments. You chose that downtown apartment, I reminded him. You said you wanted to be in the middle of everything, close to your office. And I've outgrown it. My business is expanding. I need space for a proper home office, room to entertain clients appropriately. This house would be perfect for my needs. There it was. The truth laid bare. This entire evening, the dinner party, the important business guests, the careful setup, it had all been orchestrated to back me into a corner where selling him my home would seem like the reasonable, generous thing to do. Let me understand, I said slowly, my hands gripping the edge of the table. You want me to sell you my home.
At fair market value, of course. You'd walk away with a substantial sum that would more than cover several years in a nice assisted living facility, and the house would stay in the family. Win-win. Assisted living? The words came out sharper than I intended. Damien, I don't need assisted living. I'm 70, not 90. I'm perfectly capable of... Are you? Christina interjected, her voice honey-sweet. Because watching you cook dinner today, which you clearly spent all day doing, you looked exhausted. Your hands were shaking when you brought out the plates. I stared at this woman who'd been in my home for less than an hour, who knew nothing about me or my life, offering judgments about my physical capacity as if she had any right to an opinion. My hands shake because I have arthritis, I said coldly. It doesn't make me incompetent. No one's saying you're incompetent, Damien said in that infuriating, patronizing tone. We're saying you deserve rest. You've worked hard your whole life, raised me alone after Dad died, maintained this house for decades. You've earned the right to downsize, to let someone else handle the burden of property ownership. This house isn't a burden. It's my home. It's a structure, Damien countered, 4 walls and a roof. Home is wherever you make it. And wouldn't it be better to make it somewhere without stairs to climb, without a yard to maintain, without the constant worry of unexpected repairs? Gerald Pemberton cleared his throat. Damien, perhaps this is a conversation better had privately. No, it's fine, Damien said, not taking his eyes off me. My mother and I have no secrets, and honestly, having objective outside perspectives might help her see reason. Thomas Pemberton looked deeply uncomfortable now. Even Christina seemed to sense that Damien had pushed too far, too fast. But Damien wasn't finished. The reality,
is, Mother, that you're clinging to this house out of sentiment and stubbornness. You're preventing yourself from having a more comfortable, manageable life because you can't let go of the past. And in the process, you're sitting on an asset that could be put to much better use. Better use, I echoed. You mean your use. Yes, I would benefit, but so would you. We both would. It's the logical solution to both our situations. I looked around my dining room table, at Gerald Pemberton, clearly embarrassed by being made an unwitting participant in this family conflict, at Thomas, staring at his plate and radiating discomfort, at Christina, who couldn't quite hide her satisfaction at seeing me cornered and diminished, and at my son, my only child, the baby I'd nursed through colic and childhood illnesses, the boy I'd cheered for at every soccer game and school play, the young man I sacrificed for, working double shifts at the hospital to pay for his college education. This man, who now looked at me with cold calculation, seeing not his mother, but an obstacle between him and something he wanted. The answer is no, I said quietly. Damien's expression hardened. Mother, the answer is no. This is my home. I bought it with your father. We built our life here. You grew up here. This house holds every memory I have of the life we created together, and I'm not selling it so you can have a more convenient home office. The silence that followed was suffocating. Damien's jaw clenched, a muscle twitching beneath his skin. His hands, resting on the table, curled into fists. Fine, he said finally, his voice tight with controlled anger. Then I suppose we're done here. He stood abruptly, throwing his linen napkin onto his half-finished plate. Gentlemen, Christina, I apologize for this awkwardness. My mother can be quite difficult when it comes to practical matters. Gerald Pemberton stood slowly, looking between Damien and me with troubled eyes. Perhaps this is a conversation better had privately. No, it's fine, Damien said, not taking his eyes off me. My mother and I have no secrets, and honestly, having objective outside perspectives might help her see reason. Thomas Pemberton looked deeply uncomfortable now. Even Christina seemed to sense that Damien had pushed too far, too fast. But Damien wasn't finished. The reality is, Mother, that you're clinging to this house out of sentiment and stubbornness. You're preventing yourself from having a more comfortable, manageable life because you can't let go of the past. And in the process, you're sitting on an asset that could be put to much better use. Better use, I echoed. You mean your use. Yes, I would benefit, but so would you. We both would. It's the logical solution to both our situations. I looked around my dining room table at Gerald Pemberton, clearly embarrassed by being made an unwitting participant in this family conflict, at Thomas, staring at his plate and radiating discomfort, at Christina, who couldn't quite hide her satisfaction at seeing me cornered and diminished, and at my son, my only child, the baby I'd nursed through colic and childhood illnesses, the boy I'd cheered for at every soccer game and school play, the young man I sacrificed for, working double shifts at the hospital to pay for his college education. This man, who now looked at me with cold calculation, seeing not his mother, but an obstacle between him and something he wanted. The answer is no, I said quietly. Damien's expression hardened. Mother, the answer is no. This is my home. I bought it with your father. We built our life here. You grew up here. This house holds every memory I have of the life we created together, and I'm not selling it so you can have a more convenient home office. The silence that followed was suffocating. Damien's jaw clenched, a muscle twitching beneath his skin. His hands resting on the table curled into fists. Fine, he said finally, his voice tight with controlled anger. Then I suppose we're done here. He stood abruptly, throwing his linen napkin onto his half-finished plate. Gentlemen, Christina, I apologize for this awkwardness. My mother can be quite difficult when it comes to practical matters. Gerald Pemberton stood slowly, looking between Damien and me with troubled eyes. Perhaps we should reschedule this discussion for another time. She's useless now, Damien said, not quite under his breath, but loud enough for everyone at the table to hear clearly. Stubborn, useless, and living in the past. I don't know why I bothered trying to include her in my future plans. The words struck me like a physical blow. I felt all the air leave my lungs. My vision tunneled. Somewhere distant, I heard Christina's sharp intake of breath, heard Thomas Pemberton mutter, "Jesus Christ!" Heard Gerald saying something about showing respect to one's mother. But all I could focus on was my son's face, cold, dismissive, looking at me like I was garbage to be disposed of, an inconvenience that outlived its usefulness. "Damien," I whispered. But he was already moving towards the door, already ushering his guests out of my dining room, already making excuses and apologies for my unreasonable behavior. I sat alone at my table, surrounded by the ruins of the dinner I'd spent all day preparing. The food I'd cooked with my arthritic hands, the table I'd set with my mother's china, the home I'd opened to help my son impress his business contacts. Useless. The word echoed in my mind like a bell tolling. Useless now. I don't remember how long I sat there after they left. Long enough for the candles I'd lit to burn down to nubs. Long enough for the food to grow cold on the plates. Long enough for the twilight outside my windows to deepen into full darkness. Eventually, mechanically, I began to clear the table. I moved like a sleepwalker, scraping plates, loading the dishwasher, wrapping leftover food in containers. My hands performed familiar tasks while my mind remained elsewhere, trapped in that moment when my son had called me useless. The kitchen clock read 10:30 when I finally finished cleaning. My feet were screaming, my knees throbbing with pain. I should have gone straight to bed, taken some ibuprofen, elevated my legs. Instead, I found myself walking to Theodore's old study.
We'd kept it largely unchanged after his death. His desk still sat by the window overlooking the backyard. His books still lined the shelves. Accounting texts, business management guides, mystery novels he'd loved. His reading chair, worn in spots from years of use, still sat in the corner with his favorite lamp beside it. I turned on the desk lamp and sat in Theodore's chair. The leather creaked familiarly beneath my weight. How many nights had I watched him sit here, working through tax season, balancing our budget, managing the small accounting practice he'd run from home? I pulled open the bottom drawer where I kept all our important documents: property deed, insurance policies, investment statements, bank records, the paper trail of a life built together and maintained alone after he was gone. The property deed lay on top. I pulled it out and read it by lamplight, even though I knew every word by heart. Cordelia Ann Winters. My name alone on the deed. Theodore's name had been removed after his death when I'd had everything transferred into my sole ownership. This house was mine. Legally, unquestionably, entirely mine. But as I sat there in the quiet darkness, I began to remember things. Conversations with Damien over the past few months that I dismissed as casual chatter, but which now took on a sinister new context. The time he'd asked about my estate planning. Had I updated my will recently? Did I have everything organized for when I was gone? The conversation about property taxes. Had I locked in my assessment? Did I know about the senior exemptions? Was I sure I was getting every break I deserved? His increasing interest in the house's maintenance, pointing out needed repairs, suggesting contractors, offering to handle things for me because it was too much for someone my age. I thought he was being helpful, being a concerned son looking out for his aging mother.
Now, I wondered if he'd been laying groundwork, building a case for my incapacity, creating a narrative that I was no longer capable of managing my own property. The clock in the hallway chimed 11. I sat in Theodore's chair, surrounded by the evidence of our life together, and made a decision. If Damien thought I was useless, thought I was just a stubborn old woman clinging to the past, he had seriously underestimated me. Theodore had taught me to keep meticulous records, to document everything, to understand that information was power and knowledge was protection. It was time to use those lessons. I opened my laptop, the one Damien had bought me 2 Christmases ago, claiming I needed to join the modern world, and began to research. Property records, tax assessments, transfer regulations, estate law in our state. By 1 in the morning, I had a clearer picture of what my son might be planning, and by 2, I had the beginnings of a plan of my own. Damien wanted to take my home. He wanted to push me aside like I was nothing more than an obstacle to his ambitions. But I wasn't nothing. I was Cordelia Winters. I was Theodore's wife and Damien's mother. I was 70 years old, and I'd survived poverty, widowhood, and decades of standing on my own 2 feet. I wasn't useless, and I wasn't going down without a fight. The morning after the disastrous dinner party arrived with the kind of cruel brightness that made my headache worse. I had barely slept 3 hours, spending most of the night at Theodore's desk, clicking through website after website, taking notes in my careful handwriting, building a foundation of knowledge that I hoped would protect me from whatever Damien was planning. By the time dawn broke over Millbrook Springs, painting my backyard in shades of gold and amber, I had learned more about property law, estate planning, and financial elder abuse than I'd ever wanted to know. And what I'd learned terrified me. I made coffee with shaking hands, my body protesting the lack of sleep and the hours spent hunched over a computer screen. My knees ached worse than usual, and when I caught myself in the bathroom mirror while washing my face, I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. Hollow-eyed, pale, looking every one of my 70 years and then some. But my mind was sharp. Sharper than it had been in years, actually. Fear and anger had burned away the comfortable fog I'd been living in, the maternal blindness that had prevented me from seeing what my son had become. I was halfway through my first cup of coffee when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Lauren, my daughter-in-law, or rather, my soon-to-be ex-daughter-in-law, though I suspect she didn't know that yet. I hesitated before answering. Lauren and I had always had a cordial relationship, nothing particularly warm, but nothing hostile either. She was a pediatric nurse, practical and no-nonsense, the kind of woman I thought would be a stabilizing influence on Damien's ambitions. Their marriage 3 years ago seemed solid, built on mutual respect, if not passionate romance. But she had called me crying 3 months ago, saying Damien was distant and secretive. At the time, I'd chalked it up to work stress, the normal ebbs and flows of married life. Now I wondered if that was when Christina had entered the picture. "Hello, Lauren," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Cordelia?" Her voice was tight, strained. "I need to talk to you. Can I come over?" I glanced at the clock. 7:15 in the morning. Now? "Please, Her voice cracked. "I just need to talk to someone, and I don't know who else to turn to." 20 minutes later, Lauren was sitting at my kitchen table, her nurse's scrubs wrinkled like she had slept in them, her eyes red-rimmed, her crying. I'd made her tea, chamomile with honey, and set out some of the leftover dinner rolls from last night's disaster.
"I know about Christina," she said without preamble, wrapping her hands around the warm mug like it was a lifeline. "I've known for about 6 weeks now." My stomach clenched. "Lauren, I'm so sorry. Did you know?" She looked up at me with those red eyes, searching my face for signs of betrayal. "Last night, when Damien brought her here for that dinner party, did you know she was his mistress?" "I suspected," I admitted, "the way he introduced her, the way they stood together, but
I didn't know for certain until you just confirmed it. Lauren laughed, but it was a bitter, broken sound. Of course he'd bring her here, to your home, parade her in front of business contacts like she's some legitimate colleague instead of the woman he's been sleeping with for the past 4 months. 4 months. The timeline clicked into place. That's when Damien had started asking all those questions about my house, my finances, my future plans. How did you find out? I asked gently. Text messages. Classic, right? He left his phone on the bathroom counter while he was in the shower. It buzzed. I glanced at it, and there was a message from her. Nothing explicit, but the tone... She shook her head. You know that tone. The one that makes it obvious what they are to each other. Have you confronted him? Not yet. I've been gathering evidence first. Screenshots of messages, photos of receipts for hotel rooms and restaurants I've never been to, credit card statements showing jewelry purchases for occasions that don't exist in our relationship. She pulled out her phone and began scrolling through what looked like hundreds of saved images. I'm a nurse, Cordelia. I'm methodical. If I'm going to blow up my marriage, I'm going to do it with documentation that will hold up in divorce court. I felt a surge of respect for this young woman. She wasn't falling apart despite the betrayal. She was preparing, protecting herself, thinking strategically. Why are you telling me this? Lauren set down her phone and looked at me directly. Because last night, Damien came home at almost 10 o'clock, furious, ranting about you being stubborn and difficult, about how you refused to be reasonable about the house, and in the middle of his tirade, he said something that scared me. My pulse quickened. What did he say? He said she'll understand eventually, that she doesn't have a choice. If she won't sell willingly, we'll find another way to get what we need. And when I asked what he meant, he shut down completely. Told me to mind my own business. But Cordelia, she leaned forward, her expression urgent. The way he said it, it wasn't just frustration. It was calculating, like he already had a plan in motion. The fear I'd been holding at bay since last night crystallized into something sharper, more immediate. Did he say who we was? I assume Christina. They've been inseparable lately. Every business meeting that runs late, every weekend conference he attends, I'd bet my nursing license she's involved. I thought about Christina at dinner last night. The way she'd dismissed my home as quaint and rustic. The way she'd commented on my shaking hands, pathologizing normal arthritis as evidence of incapacity. The way she'd smiled when Damien pressured me about selling the house. Tell me everything you know about Christina Ashford. Lauren's expression turned grim. She's not what she appears to be. On the surface, she's the successful financial consultant with an impressive resume. But I did some digging. What kind of digging? The internet is an amazing tool when you're a suspicious spouse with too much time and too much anger. Lauren pulled up her phone again, navigating to a folder labeled simply C.A. Christina Ashford graduated from a mid-tier business school 7 years ago. She worked for 2 different investment firms before going independent 18 months ago. But here's the interesting part. Both of those previous employers let her go under circumstances that weren't exactly voluntary. She showed me articles she'd saved. Nothing definitive, but hints and suggestions. Irregular client relationship management at one firm. Concerns about boundary professionalism at another. What does that mean in plain English? I asked. It means she was fired for getting too personally involved with clients, specifically with wealthy, older male clients. There's a pattern, Cordelia. She targets men with money, insinuates herself into their professional lives, then into their personal lives, and then, well, things get messy. No criminal charges, nothing that would show up on a background check, but whispers, complaints, NDAs that suggest settlements were paid. I felt cold despite the warm kitchen. And now she's targeted my son? Your son, who has business ambitions and an aging mother sitting on a valuable piece of real estate, Lauren said bluntly. I don't think that's a coincidence. We sat in silence for a moment, the implications hanging heavy between us. What are you going to do? I asked finally. File for divorce, but strategically, when it will cause him maximum professional damage. Lauren's face was hard, determined. Damien's trying to position himself as a family man with traditional values to win the Pemberton contract. That whole dinner party last night was part of his image crafting. But if the Pembertons find out he's been cheating on his wife, that he's destroyed his marriage for his mistress, that family man image collapses. When will you file? I'm waiting for the right moment. Damien thinks I'm clueless, that I'm the devoted little wife who will never question him. He has no idea I've already consulted with 3 different divorce attorneys. She smiled grimly. But before I do anything, I wanted to warn you, because whatever Damien and Christina are planning regarding your house, I don't think they're going to wait patiently for you to change your mind.
After Lauren left, I sat alone in my kitchen, my mind racing. My son wasn't just having an affair, he was conspiring with his mistress to somehow force me out of my own home. The question was, how? I thought about what Lauren had said, if she won't sell willingly, we'll find another way. What other ways were there? I owned the house outright, my name was on the deed. As long as I was mentally competent, no one could force me to sell. Unless they could prove I wasn't mentally competent. The thought hit me like ice water. I remembered Christina's comments about my shaking hands, my supposed exhaustion, Damien's repeated references to my age, his implications that my memory was failing, his suggestions that I couldn't properly maintain the property. Were they building a case for incompetency? Laying groundwork to have me declared unable to manage my own affairs? I pulled out my laptop again and began searching. How to declare someone incompetent, conservatorship laws, legal capacity challenges. What I found made my blood run cold. In our state, if family members could provide evidence that an elderly person was no longer capable of managing their property or finances, they could petition for conservatorship. If granted, the conservator would have legal authority to make decisions about the person's assets, including selling their property for their own good. The process required medical documentation, witness testimony, evidence of declining mental capacity or inability to care for oneself. It wasn't easy to do, but it was possible, especially if the person being targeted was isolated, elderly, and without strong support systems. I was 70 years old. I lived alone. My husband was dead. I had no other children, no close family nearby. My friends were mostly other widows from my church group and book club. Good people, but not the kind who would understand legal maneuvers or financial exploitation. I was exactly the kind of vulnerable target these laws were designed to protect, and exactly the kind of victim that predators like Christina knew how to exploit. My phone buzzed with a text message. From Damien. Mother, I hope you've had time to reconsider your position about the house. We need to talk. I'll come by this evening. Not asking, telling. The presumption in those words was staggering. I typed back carefully, I have nothing to reconsider. My answer remains no. His response came almost immediately. You're being unreasonable. This benefits both of us. Stop being stubborn. I didn't reply. Instead, I made a list of what I needed to do. First, document everything. Every conversation, every interaction, every attempt at manipulation or coercion. Date, time, witnesses, if any. Second, secure my legal standing. Update my estate documents, make sure my healthcare directives are clear, establish on the record that I was mentally competent and acting of my own free will. Third, build my own support network. Find people who could testify to my capability, my independence, my clear-minded decision-making. Fourth, investigate Christina Ashford more thoroughly. If she had a pattern of exploiting vulnerable people, I needed to know everything about it. Fifth, find out what Damien's financial situation really was. Why did he need my house so badly? Was his business actually successful, or was he in trouble? By noon, I had called my doctor's office and scheduled a complete physical and cognitive evaluation. Dr. Patricia Wu had been my physician for 15 years, and I trusted her completely. If I needed medical documentation of my mental competence, she would provide it honestly. Next, I called my attorney. Well,
technically Theodore's attorney, Maxwell Harrison had handled our wills and estate planning for decades. He was semi-retired now, but he answered my call on the second ring. "Cordelia, what a pleasant surprise! How are you holding up?" "Maxwell, I need to update my estate documents. Urgently." "Has something happened?" "I'd rather discuss it in person. How soon can you see me?" "This sounds serious. Come by this afternoon. 2 o'clock?" I spent the next 2 hours preparing. I printed out everything I'd researched about conservatorship laws, about financial elder abuse, about the legal protections available to seniors. I compiled a timeline of Damien's recent behavior, his questions about my property, his increasingly aggressive push for me to sell. I also did something I'd been avoiding for years. I logged into all of my financial accounts and reviewed them with a critical eye. Bank accounts, investment portfolios, retirement funds, property tax records, everything Theodore and I had built together, everything I'd maintained alone after his death. And I found something that made my stomach drop. 3 months ago, there had been a transfer of $15,000 from my savings account to my checking account. I vaguely remember Damien asking about it, saying something about helping me optimize my cash flow and reduce account maintenance fees. At the time, I'd been tired, I'd trusted him. I'd signed whatever paperwork he had put in front of me. But looking at the actual transfer documentation now, I saw that it hadn't been a simple internal transfer. The money had temporarily gone into a joint account, an account with both my name and Damien's name on it, before being transferred back to my checking account the next day. Why would he do that? What possible reason could there be for routing my own money through a joint account just to put it back into another one of my accounts? Unless he could prove that I had actually given him legal authority to manage my finances, creating a paper trail that showed he had legitimate authority to manage my finances, building evidence that I routinely relied on him for financial decision-making.
I felt sick. How many other times had he done this? How many other documents had I signed without reading carefully, trusting my son to have my best interests at heart? At 2 o'clock, I was sitting in Maxwell Harrison's office, a converted Victorian house on Elm Street that smelled like old books and furniture polish. Maxwell was 83, sharp as ever despite his age, with thick white hair and reading glasses perpetually perched on his nose. "Tell me everything," he said after his assistant brought us tea. I did, starting with the dinner party, Damien's demand that I sell the house, his cruel words about me being useless, then Lauren's visit, the information about Christina, the financial transfers I'd discovered, the growing fear that my son was planning to have me declared incompetent. Maxwell listened without interrupting, his expression growing more grave with each revelation. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Cordelia, what you're describing is a textbook case of financial exploitation, potentially even conspiracy to commit elder abuse." "He's my son," I said, as if that changed anything. "Which makes it worse, not better. The law takes a particularly dim view of family members who exploit their elderly relatives." He pulled out a legal pad and began making notes. "Here's what we need to do immediately. First, I'm going to draft new estate documents that explicitly state you are of sound mind, acting without coercion, and have deliberately chosen not to sell your property. We'll get them witnessed and notarized with testimony about your mental clarity. Will that be enough? It's a start. Second, we're going to revoke any powers of attorney or financial access you've given Damien. Any joint accounts need to be closed or have his name removed. Any legal authority he has over your affairs ends today. Won't he be suspicious? Alert him that I know what he's planning? Let him be suspicious. Right now, he thinks you're a naive old woman who will roll over when he applies enough pressure. Discovering that you've secured your legal standing will give him pause. It might even scare him off entirely if he realizes you're prepared to fight back. What if it doesn't scare him off? What if he escalates? Then we escalate too.
Cordelia, you need to understand something. If Damien and this Christina woman are really planning to petition for conservatorship, they'll need evidence, medical documentation of cognitive decline, witness testimony about your inability to care for yourself, evidence of financial mismanagement or unsafe living conditions. I don't have any of those things. I'm perfectly capable. I know that, but they can manufacture evidence. A doctor who will diagnose dementia based on a single, carefully staged visit, neighbors who will testify that they've noticed you seem confused, photographs of your house that make it look neglected or dangerous. It's not difficult to create a false narrative if you're willing to be dishonest. The fear that had been simmering in my gut since last night blazed into full flame. So, what do? You create a counter-narrative. You document your competence as thoroughly as they might try to document your incompetence. Medical evaluations showing cognitive health, financial records demonstrating sound decision-making, witness statements from people who interact with you regularly and can testify to your capabilities. The cognitive evaluation with Dr. Wu is scheduled for Friday. Good. I'll also want you to see a neuropsychologist for more comprehensive testing. I know someone excellent, Dr. Raymond Chen. He specializes in capacity evaluations. His testimony would carry significant weight if this ever goes to court. The word court made me flinch. You really think it might come to that? I think we need to prepare for every possibility. Maxwell set down his pen and looked at me with grandfatherly concern. Cordelia, I've known you for 30 years. I watched you and Theodore build a good life together. I helped you navigate his death and the aftermath. You're one of the most capable, clear-minded people I've ever met. But I've also seen enough of these cases to know that the legal system doesn't always protect the people it's designed to protect, especially elderly women living alone. So I'm vulnerable. You're vulnerable, he confirmed. But you're also smart, and you're taking action before your son can fully implement whatever plan he has. That gives us the advantage. Now let's make sure we keep it. Over the next 2 hours, Maxwell drafted new estate documents. We revoked the general power of attorney I'd signed years ago when Theodore first got sick, thinking Damien should be able to handle things if something happened to me. We drafted a new, more limited healthcare directive that specified exactly what decisions someone could make on my behalf if I became incapacitated, with clear exclusions around property and finances. Most importantly, we drafted a document called a Declaration of Competence and Intent, essentially a sworn statement that I was of sound mind, understood my financial situation completely, and was making conscious, deliberate choices about my property that should be respected regardless of pressure from family members. This won't prevent someone from petitioning for conservatorship, but it creates a strong presumption in your favor. Any judge looking at this case would see that you anticipated potential challenges and took proactive steps to establish your competence. That matters. By the time I left Maxwell's office, it was after 5. I felt drained, but also strangely empowered. I was fighting back. I was protecting myself. I wasn't just accepting Damien's bullying and manipulation. My phone had multiple missed calls from Damien and several increasingly irritated text messages. Where are you? I told you I was coming over this evening. Mother, answer your phone.
Mother, answer your phone. This is ridiculous. We need to talk about your situation whether you like it or not. I texted back. I was at my attorney's office, updating my estate documents. I'm on my way home now. Please do not come over tonight. I'm tired and have nothing further to discuss regarding my property. His response was immediate and angry. Your attorney? Why would you need an attorney? What are you planning? I'm protecting my interests, just as you're protecting yours. Good night, Damien. I turned off my phone before he could reply. When I got home, the house felt different somehow. Safer, now that I'd taken action, but also more precarious. Like I'd just declared war without fully understanding what weapons my opponent had. I made myself a simple dinner, scrambled eggs and toast, and sat at my kitchen table, eating mechanically while my mind raced through everything I'd learned today. Lauren's revelation about Christina's history, the financial transfers I'd discovered, Maxwell's warnings about manufactured evidence and legal vulnerabilities, the very real possibility that my son, my only child,
was planning to take everything from me. I was washing my dinner dishes when I heard a car pull into my driveway. My heart jumped, thinking Damien had ignored my request and come over anyway. But when I looked out the kitchen window, I saw Lauren's sedan, not Damien's Tesla. She was at my door a moment later, looking agitated. "He knows," she said as soon as I opened the door. "Damien knows that I've been talking to you." "How?" "Christina saw us this morning. She was apparently driving past when I left her house. She told Damien, and when he got home tonight, he confronted me, asked what we'd discussed, got angry when I wouldn't give him details." "Lauren, I'm so sorry." "Don't be. It needed to happen eventually." She came inside, and I noticed she was carrying an overnight bag. I told him I knew about the affair, that I'd known for weeks, that I was filing for divorce. How did he react? He tried to deny it at first. Then, when I showed him some of the evidence I'd gathered, he got defensive, told me I was overreacting, that Christina was helping him with his career, that I wouldn't understand the pressures he's under. She laughed bitterly. The same lines every cheating husband uses, I imagine. "Where are you staying?" "I was hoping—" She hesitated. "Would you mind if I stayed here for a few nights? Just until I can find an apartment. I don't have family in Millbrook Springs, and I don't want to stay with colleagues from the hospital. Too many questions." "Of course you can stay. The guest room is yours, as long as you need it." Relief flooded her face. "Thank you. I promise I won't be in your way." "Lauren, you're not in my way. Honestly, I'm grateful for the company and the support. I think we're both going to need allies in the days ahead." She nodded. Damien was furious when I left. Not heartbroken, just angry. Like he had damaged a possession he valued. He said that— She paused, choosing her words carefully. "He said that I was making a mistake, that I was going to regret turning against him, that everyone who opposed him lately was going to learn that he wasn't someone to cross." "He threatened you?" "Not directly, but the implication was there. And Cordelia, when he said everyone who opposed him lately, he was looking at my phone, at the text conversation I'd had with you earlier about meeting this morning." We stood in my hallway, two women who'd been betrayed by the same man for different reasons, and I felt a grim sort of solidarity forming between us. "We need to be careful," I said. "Both of us. If Damien is willing to exploit his own mother and cheat on his wife, I don't think there's much he wouldn't do to get what he wants." "Agreed, which is why I brought you something." Lauren reached into her bag and pulled out a thick folder. Copies of everything I've gathered on Christina. Her employment history, the complaints from her previous firms, financial records showing unusual patterns of spending, all the research I've been doing for my divorce case. I thought you might be able to use it. I took the folder, feeling its weight. "Thank you. We're in this together now, you and me against Damien and Christina. I know that's a terrible thing to say about my own husband. Soon-to-be ex-husband," I corrected gently, "and it's not terrible if it's true. Sometimes the people we love become people we don't recognize. It doesn't mean we're wrong to protect ourselves from them." That night, after Lauren had settled into the guest room, I sat once again at Theodore's desk and went through the information she'd provided. Christina Ashford's history was even more damning than Lauren had initially suggested. There were hints of at least 3 previous relationships with wealthy older men, relationships that ended with financial settlements, NDAs, and the men in question losing significant assets. Nothing provable in court, nothing that had resulted in criminal charges, but a pattern nonetheless. Christina wasn't just Damien's mistress. She was a professional, a predator who targeted ambitious men with access to family wealth, then helped them exploit that wealth while taking her cut. And my house, my beautiful craftsman home on Ashwood Avenue, was her current target. I pulled out a fresh notebook and began writing, not just notes this time, but a comprehensive timeline. Every interaction with Damien over the past 6 months, every question he asked about my finances, every comment about my age or capability, every push for selling the house.
The pattern was clear once I laid it out chronologically. This hadn't been impulsive. Damien had been working toward this for months, softening me up, establishing himself as my financial advisor, creating dependency. And I'd let him. I'd trusted him because he was my son, and mothers are supposed to trust their children. But not anymore. I wrote late into the night, documenting everything I could remember. When I finally climbed into bed at 2 in the morning, I felt exhausted, but also grimly determined. Damien thought I was useless, thought I was a weak old woman he could manipulate and discard. He was about to discover how wrong he was. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee brewing. For a disorienting moment, I thought Theodore was still alive, still making his morning coffee before heading to his study. Then reality crashed back. It was Lauren, my temporary house guest and unlikely ally, preparing for what we both knew would be a pivotal day. "Good morning," she said when I entered the kitchen. She was already dressed in jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. I made extra coffee. I figured we'd both need it. "Thank you." I accepted the mug she handed me, wrapping my arthritic fingers around its warmth. "Did you sleep?" "A few hours. You?" "About the same." We sat at my kitchen table, 2 women preparing for battle, and I felt grateful not to be alone in this fight. "I've been thinking," Lauren said, setting down her mug. "Damien's going to escalate now. He knows I've left him. He knows you've been to see an attorney. He knows we're working together. He's going to feel cornered, and cornered animals are dangerous." "What do you think he'll do?" "I think he'll try to force a confrontation, try to regain control of the situation." She pulled out her phone. "I got 3 more texts from him overnight. Threatening, manipulative, the full range. He wants to meet with both of us, together." My stomach tightened. "When?" "He suggested today. Neutral location. He mentioned the Riverside Cafe at 2 o'clock. "That's a public place. He wouldn't try anything in public." "Exactly. Which means he's planning to use social pressure, embarrassment, witnesses who'll see him being reasonable while we're being difficult. It's a manipulation tactic. Make us look like the unreasonable ones." I thought about this. The Riverside Cafe was the nicest restaurant in Millbrook Springs, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone. If Damien created a scene there, made it look like his elderly mother and unstable wife were ganging up on him unfairly, it would damage our credibility. But it also gave us an opportunity. "What if we turn his tactic against him?" I said slowly. "What if we meet him there, but we come prepared, with evidence, with documentation, with everything we've gathered?" Lauren's eyes lit up with understanding. Force him to confront the truth in a public setting where he can't threaten or intimidate us, where there are witnesses to whatever he says. Exactly. And I think we should bring one more person. I picked up my phone. Maxwell Harrison, my attorney. If we're going to have this confrontation, I want legal representation present. Will he come on such short notice? Only one way to find out. Maxwell answered on the second ring. When I explained the situation, he was quiet for a moment. "Cordelia, are you sure you want to do this, confronting your son publicly with an attorney present? That's declaring open warfare." "He declared war when he called me useless in front of strangers and started plotting to steal my home. I'm just responding in kind." "Fair enough. I'll be there. 2 o'clock at Riverside Cafe. And Cordelia, bring every piece of documentation you have. Every bank statement, every legal document, every piece of evidence. If we're doing this, we're doing it thoroughly." The next few hours were a blur of preparation. Lauren and I organized all the evidence we'd compiled. The financial records showing suspicious transfers, Christina's employment history with its pattern of exploitation, the timeline of Damien's escalating demands about my property, copies of the new estate documents I'd signed with Maxwell.
We printed everything, organized it into folders with tabs and labels, created a comprehensive dossier that told the complete story of what Damien and Christina had been planning. At 1:30, we were both dressed and ready. I'd chosen a navy pantsuit that Theodore had always said made me look dignified and formidable. Lauren wore professional slacks and a blazer. She looked like what she was, a competent, clear-minded professional woman, not the hysterical wife Damien would try to paint her as. Maxwell met us in the parking lot of Riverside Cafe. He was carrying his own briefcase, and his expression was grim but determined. "Are you both ready for this?" I asked him. "As ready as we'll ever be." The Riverside Cafe occupied a converted mill building overlooking Willow Creek. It was elegant without being pretentious, exactly the kind of place where Millbrook Springs professional class held business lunches and celebration dinners. As we walked in, I recognized several faces: neighbors, business owners, people from my church. Damien was already there, sitting at a corner table with Christina beside him. They looked like the perfect power couple, him in an expensive suit, her in a sleek black dress that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. They were leaning close, talking in low voices, and when they saw us approach, I watched them rearrange their expressions into masks of concerned reasonableness. "Mother!" Damien stood as we approached, his voice pitched to carry just enough that nearby tables could hear. "Thank you for coming. And Lauren, I'm glad you reconsidered." "I didn't reconsider anything. I'm here because you demanded a meeting, so let's have it."
Damien's smile flickered but held. His eyes moved to Maxwell. "And you brought your attorney. How very dramatic." "Given what we've uncovered about your plans, I thought legal representation was prudent," I said, taking a seat. Maxwell sat beside me, Lauren on my other side, creating a united front across the table from Damien and Christina. Christina was watching us with calculating eyes, her expression giving nothing away. Up close, in daylight, I could see she was probably older than I'd initially thought, mid-30s rather than early 30s, with fine lines around her eyes that expensive makeup nearly concealed. "I'm not sure what you think you've uncovered," Damien began, his tone patronizing, "but I think there's been a serious misunderstanding. Mother, I've only ever wanted what's best for you." "Stop," I interrupted. "Just stop, Damien. We're past the point of pretense now." His jaw tightened. Around us, I could sense other diners trying not to obviously eavesdrop while absolutely listening to every word. Maxwell opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. "Mr. Winters, I'm Maxwell Harrison, Mrs. Winters' attorney. I'm here to inform you that as of yesterday, all powers of attorney you previously held regarding your mother's affairs have been revoked. Additionally, your access to any joint accounts has been terminated, and your mother has executed new estate documents that explicitly state her intentions regarding her property." Damien's face flushed red. "You can't do that!" "She absolutely can," Maxwell continued calmly. "She's a competent adult with full legal capacity to manage her own affairs. Which brings us to the matter we're really here to discuss, your apparent plan to petition for conservatorship in order to gain control of her property." The color drained from Damien's face. Christina's hand, resting on the table, clenched into a fist. "That's absurd," Damien said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "I never." "You told your wife, and I quote, 'If she won't sell willingly, we'll find another way to get what we need,'" Lauren said, her nurse's training making her voice clinically precise. "You've spent months laying groundwork, questioning her mental capacity, suggesting she couldn't manage her property, creating financial dependencies. It's textbook preparation for a competency challenge." "Lauren, you're twisting my words." "Am I? Because I have text messages, recorded conversations, financial records showing how you've been systematically positioning yourself as her financial manager. 3 months ago, you moved $15,000 of her money through a joint account, not because it served any legitimate financial purpose, but to establish documentation that you had access and authority." Christina leaned forward, her voice honey-sweet.
This is clearly a misunderstanding. Damien has only been trying to help his mother. At her age, it's natural to need assistance. I'm 70, not incapacitated, and I don't need your assessment of what's natural at my age, Ms. Ashford, especially not from someone with your particular history. Her eyes narrowed. I don't know what you think you know about me. I know that you were terminated from Westfield Investments for inappropriate client relationship management, Lauren said, pulling out more documents. I know that you were let go from Brighton Financial Group under similar circumstances. I know that you have a pattern of targeting wealthy men, insinuating yourself into their personal and financial lives, and benefiting when those men gain access to family assets. Christina's composure cracked. Those are lies. They're facts, documented in employment records and legal settlements. Lauren spread out papers across the table. 3 different men in the past 7 years. All of them ended up in messy divorces or family disputes after becoming involved with you. All of them lost significant assets. And now you've targeted my husband, who conveniently has an aging mother sitting on valuable real estate. Several nearby tables weren't even pretending not to listen anymore. I saw Martha Hendricks from my book club staring with wide eyes. Tom Bradley from the bank had his phone out, probably texting the gossip to half of Millbrook Springs. Damien stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. This is ridiculous. You're both being paranoid and vindictive. Mother, I've tried to help you, and this is how you repay me. By hiring lawyers and making accusations. You called me useless, I said quietly, but my voice carried in the suddenly hushed restaurant. In front of strangers, in my own home, you called me useless because I wouldn't hand over my property to you. You humiliated me, dismissed me, treated me like an obstacle to be removed rather than your mother. I was frustrated. You were calculating, Maxwell interjected, and the evidence supports that. Mrs. Winters has undergone comprehensive medical and cognitive evaluations. She's been assessed by both her primary physician and a neuropsychologist. Both have certified her complete mental competence. Any attempt to challenge her capacity will fail. Furthermore, I added, drawing strength from having my allies beside me, I've executed a declaration of competence and intent. I've explicitly stated, in legally binding documents, that I'm choosing not to sell my property, that I am aware that you want me to sell, that I'm declining of my own free will, without coercion, with full understanding of the financial implications. Damien's hands were shaking. You've been planning this, plotting against me. We've been protecting ourselves, Lauren corrected. There's a difference. You were the one plotting, Damien. You and Christina. You were the ones planning to exploit a 70-year-old woman for financial gain. She's my mother. That house should be mine anyway.
Why? I asked simply. Because you want it? Because you think I'm too old to deserve my own home? Because Christina has convinced you that you're entitled to whatever you want? Christina finally spoke, her voice cold and hard. This is absurd. We're leaving. She started to stand, but Lauren's next words froze her in place. The Pemberton Group should probably know about this, about the fraud their potential consultant is involved in, about his failing marriage and his plot to exploit his own mother. Damien's face went white. You wouldn't. Why not? You were willing to destroy your mother's life for a business deal. Why shouldn't your business deal be destroyed by the truth? Gerald Pemberton values family integrity, traditional values, honesty. How do you think he'll react when he learns that the family man he met at my dinner party is actually a cheating husband conspiring with his mistress to steal from his elderly mother? The calculation in Damien's eyes was almost visible as he weighed his options. He looked at Christina, who was staring at him with an expression that suggested she was already planning her exit strategy. What do you want? Damien asked finally, his voice defeated. Maxwell pulled out another document. Sign this.
It's a legally binding agreement that you will make no further attempts to pressure, coerce, or legally challenge your mother regarding her property, that you acknowledge her full mental capacity and her right to make her own decisions, that you will have no involvement in her financial affairs going forward. And if I don't sign? Then we go public with everything, Lawrence said. The affair, the exploitation attempt, Christina's history. We contact the Pemberton Group, the Business Licensing Board, every professional contact you have. We make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man you are. Damien looked at the document, then at me. For just a moment, I saw something in his eyes. Maybe regret, maybe just the realization that he'd lost. You're really going to do this to your own son? You were really going to do worse to your own mother. The difference is I'm giving you a choice. Sign this, walk away, rebuild your life honestly, or refuse and face the full consequences of what you've done. The silence stretched for what felt like forever. Christina was watching Damien with narrow eyes, clearly calculating whether he was still useful to her or if she should cut her losses. Finally, Damien reached for a pen. He signed the document with quick, angry strokes. Maxwell witnessed it, then passed it to me to sign as well. "This doesn't mean I forgive you," Damien said as he stood. "This doesn't make what you're doing right." "No, but it protects me from what you were planning to do. And right now, that's all that matters." Christina was already walking toward the exit, not waiting for Damien. He stood there for a moment longer, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Anger, definitely, but maybe also something like loss. "I'm sorry," I said quietly, meaning it. "I'm sorry it came to this. I'm sorry you became someone I couldn't trust. But I won't let you destroy me to build yourself up." He left without responding, following Christina out of the restaurant. The moment the door closed behind them, I felt something release in my chest. Tension I'd been carrying for weeks, maybe months. Around us, the restaurant slowly returned to normal conversation levels, though I knew this story would be all over Millbrook Springs by evening. "Are you okay?" Lauren asked softly. "I don't know," I admitted. "I just legally separated myself from my only child. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to feel." "Relief, maybe," Maxwell suggested gently. "You just protected everything you and Theodore built. You just defended your independence and your dignity. That's worth something." 3 months later. The maple trees on Ashwood Avenue were bare now, their branches stark against the gray November sky. I was sitting in my kitchen in my house that no one could take from me, drinking coffee and reading the newspaper when Lauren came in from her morning run. She'd found an apartment 2 weeks ago, but still came by regularly. We had become genuine friends through this ordeal, bound together by shared experience and mutual support. You'll never guess who I saw at the grocery store. Who? Christina Ashford. Or rather, Christina Ashford loading luggage into a car with California plates. Looks like she's leaving town. And Damien? Lauren's expression grew more serious. "I heard through the hospital grapevine that the Pemberton deal fell through. Apparently, word got around about the situation, not from us, just normal small-town gossip, and Gerald Pemberton decided to go with a different consultant, someone with less complicated family dynamics." I felt a ping of guilt, quickly followed by a reminder that I hadn't caused this. Damien's choices had led to these consequences. "How's your divorce proceeding?" "Almost finalized. Damien's been surprisingly cooperative, probably because he knows I have enough evidence to make things very difficult for him if he fights me. I'll be officially free by Christmas." "What will you do then?" She smiled. "I've been offered a position at County General. Better pay, better hours, fresh start."
I shook my head. We hadn't spoken since that confrontation at Riverside Cafe 3 months ago. He'd made no attempt to contact me, and I'd made none to contact him. Maybe someday we'd find a way back to each other, but I wasn't holding my breath. "I'm okay," I said, and realized I meant it. I have my home, my independence, my dignity. I have friends. I gestured to Lauren. I have my book club and my garden and my life.
It's not the life I imagined. I thought I'd grow old with my son still in it, but it's mine, and no one can take that away from me. Later that afternoon, after Lauren had left, I walked through my house slowly. The craftsman details Theodore and I had loved, the built-in bookshelves holding 3 generations of memories, the kitchen where I'd cooked thousands of meals, the living room where we'd celebrated Christmases and birthdays. This house wasn't just a structure, despite what Damien had said. It was a repository of my life, my history, my identity. It was proof that I'd survived loss and hardship and loneliness. It was evidence that I was still here, still standing, still capable. I was 70 years old. My son had called me useless and tried to take everything from me. But I'd fought back. I'd found allies. I protected what was mine. And in doing that, I discovered that I was far from useless. I was strong, resourceful, and still very much in control of my own life. The for sale sign went up on a Tuesday morning. Not on my property, on the downtown loft where Damien had lived. I heard about it from Martha Hendricks at book club. "Did you see? Your son's place is on the market. I heard he's leaving Millbrook Springs, taking a position with some firm in Chicago." I didn't respond, just nodded and turned the conversation back to our discussion of the month's book selection. But later, driving home, I felt a complicated mix of emotions. Relief that Damien was leaving, that I wouldn't risk running into him at the grocery store or the bank. Sadness that it had come to this, that the child I'd loved had become a stranger I couldn't trust. When I got home, there was an envelope in my mailbox. No return address, but I recognized Damien's handwriting. Inside was a simple card and a check. The check was for $15,000, exactly the amount he'd transferred through the joint account, the manipulation that had started me investigating in the first place. The card read, "I'm paying back what I took. It's not enough, but it's a start. I'm sorry, Mom. I hope someday you can forgive me. D." I stood in my kitchen, holding the check and the card, and felt tears start to fall for the first time since this whole ordeal began. I didn't know if I could forgive him. I didn't know if we'd ever have a relationship again. But this small gesture, this acknowledgement that he'd been wrong, was something. I put the check in my dresser drawer, unsure if I'd cash it or not. The money didn't matter as much as what it represented. Recognition that I'd been right to fight back, that I'd been right to protect myself. I was 71 years old. My son had called me useless and tried to steal my home. But I'd proven him wrong in every way that mattered. I was still standing, still independent, still living in the house I loved. And that, I realized, was victory enough. So that's my story. The story of how my son's cruelty and greed became the catalyst for me discovering my own strength. If you've experienced something similar, family betrayal, elder exploitation, being dismissed because of your age, I want you to know you're not useless. You're not powerless. There are laws that protect you, people who will support you, ways to fight back. Don't let anyone, not even family, make you feel like you don't deserve respect, independence, and control over your own life. I'm Cordelia Winters. I'm 71 years old, and I'm done being underestimated. Thank you for following my story. Please comment below. Have you or someone you know experienced similar family exploitation? How did you handle it? And share this video with anyone who might need to hear this message that age doesn't equal helplessness and it's never too late to stand up for yourself.